Well, all right, YouTube, the day has finally come. This is Brian with Renegade Trucking, and sorry for the clickbait title, but I know you're wondering, did I pass my CDL skills test or not? I had to do the clickbait title because they had to go to the manual in order to determine whether or not the state handbook, in order to determine whether or not I passed it, and I'm going to talk about that towards the end because that's when the incident occurred. So, of course, there had to be one. So I showed up. It was 8 a.m. was when my test was, and you needed to be there 15 to 20 minutes early. I got there, waited for the examiner to take me over to the truck. We got over there, and I started off. They let you know once the test begins what section or sections you are doing for your pre-trip. And my section was the trailer, as well as always, you're going to be doing the coupling and the in-cab portion. So I, of course, start off, I have like a brain fart and start forgetting some of the portions of the coupling, but I believe I knocked them all out anyways. The ones that I missed, I went back and grabbed and went through, did the trailer, go through, do the in-cab portion. There was a little bit of a discrepancy in the lab portion of the test where you check for the, leaks, alarms and lights, and then the button pop. In that portion, I guess the instructor believed, from his point of view, it's really difficult to tell because there are only markings every 25 psi, and we're checking for whether or not it has lost 4 psi. So the instructor felt that it had moved more than 4 psi, and I had believed that it had only gone 4 psi, which is within limits. And as this is the truck that we had been using for the past week, and it was passing easily every time. I had thought that, as like I'm saying, it's really a judgment call. Anyways, I requested to restart my lab and was granted that. If I, had not been granted that, then either that would mean that I had probably already passed it or had already failed previously from something else. So anyways, they let me redo it. This time it definitely did go more than 4. This time it dropped about 6 or 7 psi, so a huge difference. Obviously I had to bring it all the way back up to pressure again and everything, but yeah, it was for sure failed this time. And so I noted that, and then everything was fine. Moved on to the backing portion. Did my straight back, did my offset, everything was good. Go and do the alley dock, and of course, my nightmare comes true, and I end up with everything all jacked up, and I used a couple pull-ups. I lost track of how many I did because things just started going awry, and I ended up going on the boundary twice, which a third time would have failed me, but luckily after the second time I was able to pull it off enough that I was able to take another pull up and do a straight back in, and I decide to get out and look to ensure that I am in place and that I'm parallel to the line, because that's what we're told in training, that everything has to be exactly parallel to the line or it is a failure. So I'm looking and I'm like maybe 1 degree, I'm like splitting hairs here, but I'm like terrified that I'm gonna not get this exam on a technicality, or not pass because of this. And so I asked if I'm allowed to know how many points I've already accumulated, and they're not permitted to tell you. So I didn't know if I could do another pull-up. Even if I did, I wasn't certain at how much, if I would totally screw it up or cost more points. So I sat there looking at this from every angle, for nearly 10 minutes because I had my stopwatch going, so I could keep track of the time to make sure I didn't go off on my time limit. And man, it was finally, I just decided, I'm like, this is nearly perfectly straight. I had him repeat the instructions. He showed me the diagram. And so anyways, I decided to go with it because I didn't know how many points I had. I didn't know if I pulled up again, if I would instantly fail for using another pull up. I really just didn't know. And I felt that it was very straight. Not exactly perfectly, but everything was, very straight. So I got back in the cab and I pulled the horn, and he walked up to the passenger side and let me know, congratulations, you've passed. And so he said what they were looking for there, because he couldn't, all the questions that I was asking, they couldn't, they can't tell you anything. And so anyways, he said basically they need it to be straight enough that if you were backed up to a dock, that they'd be able to safely load and unload the vehicle. So I was clearly, perfectly fine as far as that goes. So that was all done. So at that point, I took a chill pill. Basically, I went and used the bathroom, grabbed a cup of water, and go out for the road test. I go do the road test, everything's going fine. I even had one of the tight turns that I had an issue with. I was able to successfully navigate this. Actually, that's the one from my video where I was talking about last Thursday in my week 4 recap, where I said I shifted over the railroad tracks. It was that same exact turn, and this time I made sure I didn't shift over the railroad tracks, and I nailed the turn. So everything was good there. And there were some differences on the road test, which, I don't think I can really get into on any of that, but I had seen everywhere that I went on the road test previously throughout practice, since you're driving through, the area, the local area, and we had traveled most of the roads in that local area, or at least most of the truck roads. And but there were some different maneuvers that we did, like lane changes, just for the sake of lane changes, and different. Part of it is calling out signs, and then you need to provide what they are, what you saw, and then also there were some additional questions that I was asked during like the roadside stop start, but it's all, nothing, like real brain teasers or anything. It was just something that caught me off guard because it was all new. None of that was handled in training. And so anyways, I get all the way back to the range to go do my railroad, the Hazmat railroad stop. And if you've been to the school or to the range, then you know that that is an extremely tight right-hand turn, and that is where, when you're just pulling onto the range, and then to do the railroad stop, you're also getting all the way over to the right lane, and there's really not a lot of room, and a lot of students are, well, I don't know if a lot, but in my month there, I've seen a handful of them make it all the way through, and then they fail directly on that turn because their trailer tires get too close to what they consider the curb, and it's a failure. And I wanted to make sure that that didn't occur, and so I was pulling forward, and I've not one time during this entire any opportunity that I've had to do this railroad stop start, or whatever, the Hazmat railroad stop, I've not had a single issue pulling in on this difficult turn. And this is a low traveled road, and there was some traffic coming, and it caught me off guard. I don't have, whatever, these are all excuses. Basically, I got distracted and I wasn't paying attention, and I started to make my turn a little bit too late. As I'm pulling in, there is a sign that is kind of leaning. I think it's like a road sign, or it was the stop sign maybe, kind of like leaning in, and my left front hood mirror was about to make contact with it, and I immediately stopped. And I just take like a breather, and I look, and as far as I can see, there's like no traffic coming, and there hadn't been any behind me previously as I was coming down the road. And I didn't really know what to do in this point. I can't continue forward with my turn, or I'm going to make contact, and I'm pretty sure they're going to call that a collision. When I say make contact, I mean like the sign's here and my hood mirror is here, and it may go. It may have done that. So I back. Since there's no traffic or anything, I back up like 2 feet, if that, and continue my turn, and stop and ask if I'm still doing, or I said, did I just fail my exam? And he says, I don't know, I can't tell you that. So I'm like, great. So I'm like, and at this point I'm having like a nervous breakdown, and I'm like, am I still continuing the Hazmat railroad stop? And he says, yes. So I think that's a good sign at least. So I continue, I pull up, I do that, and as I'm stopped there, I'm like, nothing in my life has ever been more insane. I told one of my friends that I was in the Marines with, I said, I would rather go through Marine Corps boot camp twice than ever have to take this test one more time. Which maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but honestly today I don't feel like it, especially with how physically fit I am today. The mental aspect is one thing, but man, this was crazy. So I've never done anything. My degree is in IT security. I've done all sorts of difficult computer certifications, and nothing that I've ever done has been as insane as this. And I'm very anti-government overreach, and at this point I'm like flipping out in my head, like if I fail this because of some stupid like red tape BS, I'm gonna just lose it. So I got all this going on in my head, and he's like, man, just, take a couple deep breaths and let's just go ahead and do this the rest of the railroad stop. So I do that, everything, pass that successfully. And he has me stop the vehicle. And he's like, at this point is when I would tell you whether or not you passed or failed. However, I don't know. I need to consult the state handbook on this, because that has never occurred before. And I'm like, of course, great. So I'm like, all right. So we get out, and he thought the range manager had a copy of a handbook in his desk, but I guess he couldn't find it or whatever. And I have like some of the other instructors are, asking me, and I'm like, I just shrug, and they're looking at me like I'm some sort of an idiot or whatever. Like, how does he not know whether or not he passed? And so, anyways, we walk over to the office, and because there was no, or he couldn't find the state handbook or whatever. So we go over to the office, and he has to take a couple minutes to look. But as we're walking over there, he tells me, he's like, that's never happened before. He's like, that happens sometimes in real life where you get into a really tight situation, and you handled it the way, that you should have, checking for traffic, in your mirrors and everything, or, everything that you can see. And then, backing, you stopped before you made, before it made contact. And there was no traffic behind you, so you weren't impeding the flow of traffic. So he's like, I think you passed, but I need to read through the manual to see if there's anything that like specifically fails you for this. So he asked me how I felt I did, and I'm like, up until that point, I felt like I was a safe driver. I did everything that I was taught in training. I really, other than, if you take that out of the equation, and which, I never made contact with anything and successfully navigated the turn afterwards. I didn't feel like, there was anything. I know, there were, like 2 or 3 gears that I did grind. I couldn't believe how on point my driving was today, honestly. Everything was going great once I handled that alley dock. And so anyways, I was like, I felt like everything was good. And he's like, I'm glad you feel that way. He's like, one thing that I noticed, he's like, I will tell you that I felt like I was driving. He's like, I'm not just blowing smoke up your butt here, but I felt like I was driving with a professional driver, not a student, not like what we typically see at this time in the game. And he's like, so that's really good. The one thing to note was, and it's so funny that he pointed this out because I noticed I was doing it, and I did not do this during the entire training, but I guess I felt so comfortable today. He pointed out that I was doing one-handed steering and shifting while I was going through the turn, which is not permitted as a student. You have to, anytime that you are turning, you're required to have 2 hands on the wheel, which it's probably that way out there on the road, I would assume. And I was just it was in areas with heavy traffic where I wanted to make sure that I got up to speed quickly. And, so that's just the reasoning of why I was doing it. But I felt great about everything. But anyway, so he said that, so that was cool. So he goes and he checks and comes back out and he's like, I can't see anything that specifically, states since you didn't impede traffic, you checked before backing and you didn't make contact with anything, you have passed. So then, thank God all the pressure was off. So they gave me my certificate. It's really cool. This place gives you a voucher where you get to, if you go into the local DMV or tax collector's office, it's already hooked up through them where they pay for the CDL portion. Now, I'll have to pay for my hazmat stuff and everything tomorrow, but the CDL itself will be covered by them. And if you go, like since I live outside of the area, if I were to go to my local tax collector's office, they reimburse you the amount of your CDL. So I thought that was really cool. But yeah, so sorry again for the clickbait title, but it was just like a crazy circumstance where the instructor didn't even, or the examiner didn't even know whether or not I passed. They had to go look it up. So, but other than that, everything was great. He was like, yeah, it was crazy. Everything was so awesome. Other than alley dock, could have been better, but everything else was so great on the driving portion. And then I get into that final one, and usually people fail from their trailer tires, and they said they've never seen anyone almost hit on that one. So, go figure. I'm blazing the trail, I guess. But, I think some of it, I don't know if it was from the wind or whatever, but that sign is kind of like leaning a little bit. But, there's my excuse on that. But yeah, it was pretty crazy. But yeah, I passed. So thankfully that's all done and gone. And now I just have to go get my CDL tomorrow morning. I have an appointment for that and my hazmat fingerprints, and then I'm good to go. So I'll have a video on the process for actually getting your CDL and the whole hazmat portion. But thanks again for watching. Thanks for watching this whole journey so far. And please, like, comment, and subscribe because in the future you'll be seeing all the rest of my career when it actually starts, when I go to my first company. So, and I'll be documenting from then forward. So again, thanks for watching. Stay safe out there, and I'll catch you on the flip side.